What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Cover Killer Nation here for another album review. But first, it's time for a double take moment. It's actually the album cover for the new Amorphis album entitled The Beginning of Times. And if you take a look at that egg and you take a look at things like that, and you kind of research and go back into your mind over the past couple of years, your album cover art reminds you a lot of Wolfmother's Cosmic Egg. But of course, this is Amorphis, which is a much different beast, a little bit more of a progressive band as opposed to Wolfmother, which would typically be found in your pop rock section at your local music store. Of course, Amorphis is a tried and true band. This is a band that's gone through many different stages, many different acts of their career, and their resurgence as of late has been, well, pretty phenomenal. In fact, The Beginning of Times debuted at number one on the Finnish album charts. Not that that's all that much of a surprise, as they are somewhat of a Finnish national treasure, so to speak. And it's very reflective upon the subject matter that they speak about in their music, and a lot of it has to do with the Finnish tale of creation and other legends and myths. That is similar to what you would perhaps see with the myths of Norway or the Vikings or things like that. However, every culture seems to have their myths. It's almost like if there would be an American band out there that would talk about people such as George Washington, or if there were legendary songs sung about Paul Bunyan or somebody that was a little bit more of a mythical figure as opposed to a real figure such as Washington or Lincoln or Jefferson or any of the other prominent figures in American lore. Now, with this particular album, it's once again another concept album along those same lines, where these are all very personal writings that are based around stories from this folklore and the like. So once again, it does have that elegant personal touch to it. And like albums that we have seen over the past couple of stretches here for Amorphis since the latter part of the 2000s, we're seeing, like I said, a real resurgence for this particular band, and the way that they're able to put a very melodic and a very progressive side onto their music, while also coupling the one thing that you could say that albums from the early 2000s to the mid-2000s were kind of lacking. That was a lot of depth, a lot of variety, a lot of real feeling and oomph. It felt as though those Amorphis albums were lacking something, and even though Tuanella is one of my favorite records from this particular band, it is one that I admit sometimes feels as though it's lacking something. Even though those death metal vocals do make an appearance on the song Greed, it doesn't feel like it's a complete and comprehensive effort without it. Something that has changed ever since they changed vocalists up, and each album subsequently since then has been a little bit better, if not, well, the best that they have done since their work in the early 1990s. Yeah, did you get all that? Well, anyways, with The Beginning of Times, we're seeing kind of the same formula done again. However, it's surprising how sometimes a very formulaic band can still keep things fresh by the way in which they execute things. I would say that if there is a theme to this album review, the theme is execution. And the reason for that is because Amorphis is not necessarily going to build on too many of the different things that they do. They're not necessarily going to change everything, raise the bar, and try at this stage of their career to really upstage everything that they've done prior to this. They're just going to write solid, good music that you're going to enjoy. And really, the one thing that you have to notice is the multi-instrumentalization that they're able to accomplish on a record such as this one, where not only do you have your basic guitars, your bass, your drums, your vocals, but you also have the emergence of keys, you have flutes, you have other wind instruments that make their subtle hints and their subtle faces seen throughout specific tracks. Now, there are a number of standout tracks on this particular record. However, there's two that I'm going to mention, and I'm going to mention why I mentioned them, say that 3 times fast, here shortly. Those two songs are Battle for Light and You I Need, which are tracks number 1 and 4, should I say, respectively on this particular record. And what I like about these tracks, why they deserve to be mentioned, is the vocals on these particular songs. These are very well executed. These are songs that are able to blend a very catchy kind of hook to it with vocals that are beautifully rendered, not to mention well represented and well presented to a listener. I know that sounded a little redundant. However, it is something that needs to be really spoken about twice, considering it really drives the point home. Now, all of these other tracks that are on here are no slouches as well. Songs such as 3 Words, Soothsayer, Crack in the Stone, Beginning of Time, the two that really end this album, they really end it on a very high note. They really throw out all the stops. Even though they are not really changing up their style all that much, that doesn't mean that this band is afraid to take risks, because they certainly are not. It's just that the subtlety of their risks, it's really not as easily heard by a listener, either that or it's something that's not a magnificent feature on a particular record, considering they've already taken risks in their career. They've gone from a deathy style at the beginning of part of their career to emerging as more of a progressive touch with a little bit of a folk swing in there. And ever since then, well, there's really no need for them to go too much farther, because that alone is a pretty long journey, not to mention they're taking steps in general to continue that pathway. Overall, this is a really good record. In fact, this is something that I didn't know was really coming out. I knew that Amorphis had something planned for the future. However, I didn't realize that it was going to be coming out in June. I thought this was something that was detailed for a later release this year. So, obviously, I was taken by surprise by this record whenever I found out that it was being released. Not to mention, this is probably the first Amorphis record I've ever picked up the day in which it came out. And, well, I gotta be honest, it's one that I'm proud that I did. This is a solid 8.5 out of 10. This is something where some people might think to themselves, it's just another Amorphis record. But whenever you take a listen to it, and whenever you understand what they've done in their career, and you understand how they're really building upon each passing album, and they continue to tell these stories and these folklore traditions, it just really gives this album a very personal feel to it. And that personal feel, coupled with the theme of the day of execution, whenever you combine those two together, what you get is some really damn good music. Not to mention something that definitely has that touch where it's coming straight from the heart, and they mean every word that they say. This is not necessarily something where it feels fake at any point. So for those of you who maybe have never heard of Amorphis, or for those of you who have been longtime fans and just didn't know this was out, well, it is. Looks a lot like Cosmic Egg by Wolf Mother, but it's a damn hell of a lot better. So definitely check out the beginning of Times, should I say, by Amorphis, which is out now. And as always, coverkillernation saying, I may love Rusty Moon off of 2NL more than I like any other Amorphis song, but I'm biased. It was the first song I fell in love with from the band. Definitely check out this album because, well, if this is your first experience with the band, you might find your favorite song and the song that you're talking to future metal fans about on this one.